All right, we're live. We're live. We're live. Thank you, Jesus. Yeah, good evening, Seun Olagunju-Lana. It's such an honor having you here. The first time I met you was through Anu Olaiwaju. She's your friend, I believe so. And I connected to one of our sessions and she had you on board. I think she was still doing a conversation with Anu then. I don't know about now. I think she still does the same.
Yeah.
And from then on, I got interested in the work you do, and since then, I've been keeping tabs with you. Yeah, and since they gave us this exercise from ALX, African Leadership Accelerator Program, which is the subsidiary of the ALG, which is African Leadership Group, headed by our beloved Fred Swanika, to reach out to Hummingbirds, people who are contributing significantly to community development within our community and around the world. And you're doing significant work, I must tell you, and I'm inspired. So I thought
Thank
to have you on this platform.
thank
Yeah,
you so much.
yeah, yeah. So on my notes, I have tell me a little about yourself, but I kind of looked you up on LinkedIn. I think I'll read that first. Then you will just tell us what you don't know.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. All right. So let me
But that
just.
profile on LinkedIn is quite long ago. Are you sure you want to
It's
read
quite
out?
uh, well. I think since you're here, let's just make it count. Well, so people can really know you. Or we should just do the simple one.
No,
Which
no
one?
worries. You can read it. I'm just giving a heads up to you and to the audience who is going to listen to this
Oh,
that profile is long.
very
But
long.
it's
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah. Very 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 comprehensive. So let me just read straight off.
Okay.
Seun Olagunju is an international development practitioner based in Nigeria. She is recognized for her work as the founder of the Development School Africa, an organization that partners with governments, educational bodies, and development practitioners to equip young people in Africa with the education, skills, and resources needed to promote sustainable development. Sustainable development. With over 6 years of experience in development and technology sector, she has worked extensively in introducing education for sustainable development to young people in sub-Saharan Africa. Her passion lies in coaching young people, young individuals, and businesses in Africa, teaching them about sustainable development and supporting them in developing innovative solutions to address global problems in their community. Which is why she's even here. During her career, she has consulted and for prominent governmental organizations such as the Office of the Vice President in Nigeria, as well as international organizations such as the UNDP, UN Youth Envoy, and Facebook, collaborating with them to design and implement programs and products that cater to the needs of young people. In recognition of her impactful work at the community level, she was honored by Leading Ladies Africa as a young woman transforming Africa. In 2020, Sheung joined Peace First as the regional manager for Sub-Saharan Africa, where she recruited hundreds of young people across 30 African countries as change makers and supported them with digital tools, coaching, and startup funding to implement their social change ideas. She subsequently transitioned to the digital transformation team as the senior product manager in February 2022. In this role, she's currently involved in building technology systems that enables young people worldwide to convert their change-making ideas into real-life projects. Sheung is committed to sustainable development in Africa. Sheung's commitment to sustainable development in Africa has earned her several recognitions, including the 2021 Sustainability Leader in Nigeria by United People Global, and in 2019, Leading Ladies Africa recognition as a young woman transforming Africa through impact at the community level. She was named one of the 30 most influential women in youth leadership by the Young African Leaders Initiative in March 2021 and one of 50 most inspiring women in Social Development by TEDx Olu-Yole. Seun Olagunju-Lana is a Subwim plum tray. I didn't get that fellow. Plum tray, right? Plum tray. A member of the International Society of Sustainable Professionals in 2023, a 2023 World Economic Forum Global Shaper, and a 2023 Global Youth Ambassador for their world. And that is the little we know about
I
Seun
told you I was
Olagunju-Lana,
not professional.
which is a lot, which is a whole
Yeah,
lot, which is
a lot.
a whole lot, a whole lot. So aside what we know here, because what we know here, is enough to blow us away. We're already blown away, But
Yeah.
tell me a little about yourself. Something we don't know, something as off LinkedIn. Yeah,
Okay, something of LinkedIn. So from LinkedIn, you already knew that I'm an international development practitioner. You already knew
yeah,
that I'm based in Lagos. But my work kind of spans beyond Lagos because I work across different countries in sub-Saharan Africa. I
yeah,
think that also from LinkedIn, you already knew that international development is a broad field. So my work sort of centers around education, particularly education for sustainable development. But
yeah.
something you may not know on LinkedIn would be that I actually studied English language for my bachelor's degree from Obafemi
Oh
Awolowo
wow.
University. So how I found my way into technology first and then
Okay.
international development, that's like a whole story on its own. But what I had studied for
Wow.
my first degree was actually English language, and then I recently completed a 3 month certificate program from the London School of Political Science and Economics in public
Yes.
policy analysis as well. And then I really love to buy books, bookish related
Wow.
things. Like you see me at first, you think like I'm a nerd, but and I used to
Wow.
enjoy reading a lot, even though I'm trying to find that passion again. And I think one thing you
Wow.
won't find on LinkedIn will be that I'm married to my guy. His name is
Yeah.
Ayo. If you follow me on Instagram, you'll hear me
Yes.
talk about him here and there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
On Instagram. Yeah. On Instagram. Yeah. So it's such an honor us having you here. Everybody that's going to watch this is such an honor. Please, I want everyone to pay attention and get the best, make the most of this session. Once again, thank you for honoring this invitation, and
Thank you for
I'm
having
deeply
me.
honored. All right. So I will just move straight, and just to mention, that just speaks a lot to young people. I don't because we do a lot of work around the young people development space, and which is tremendous because we know the humongous population of youths in Africa. I
Yeah.
think they say in 2030, 2032, about 40% of the global youth population will be from Africa, which is which is a lot. If
Yeah.
40% of global youth population will be from Africa, it means that the work you're
Yeah.
doing is extremely important. And that speaks to your transition from English language to what you're doing now. And that just speaks to the fact that life is not a straight line.
Not.
Life is not a straight line. So I will just move straight to the question. I've seen the work you do around the development school Africa, how that you equip young people with the skills and the knowledge required to implement um, global change, global change at a local level to ensure that the SDGs are actualized. Actualized. So, um, tell me about this. Tell me about this work that you do.
Thank you for that introduction once again. The Development School Africa actually started this year, even though it's a vision that had been on my heart since for as long as I can remember. I mean, if I
Right.
open my journal, you see different points in time when I wrote, "You're going to start a development academy for young Africans," and it had different names. It wasn't until I was going to start that I gave it the development class. Somewhere I was like, "Oh, the sustainable development something, the young African." But when the vision was just like it's just burning in your heart, you just give it different names, you write it everywhere. But I didn't think it was. I think it was until December of last year into January of this year that it became such a burden So it felt like, when you're seeing a vision and then that vision turns into a burden that you can't sleep at night because of how heavy it feels on your heart. And you just know that you're supposed to do this thing. And if you don't do this thing, it feels like you failed yourself or something that should happen that is not supposed to happen. That was how it was
Yeah.
for me. And funny thing is, one of the videos that I found when I was doing research, trying to find a template or blueprint for how the development school Africa was going to run, was actually the third video that Fred, who is the founder of the African Leadership Group, had spoken on
Oh,
about
wow.
the depth. Yeah, it spoke about how there was like a fault in African leadership and how he had this vision to sort of like build an academy that raises young African leaders. And I remember when I watched that TED video, I made everyone that I'd spoken to about my vision also watch it, because that was like the closest thing to what was in my head at the time.
Wow.
And so I had to like share,
Wow.
like, you guys should listen to what he's saying, this is similar. So the development school is, as the name implies, is actually a school, but it's a different type of school. When you think about schools in Africa, you think about like your normal primary, secondary, or tertiary institutions where you go and you earn a degree that you can apply to a particular industry or field in the world. And so you think about subjects like mathematics, English on a basic level, and as you advance into tertiary institutions, you think about the kind of subjects that we also take there. But for the development school, it's different because we're not talking about basic education like math, English, and whatnot. We're talking about a new kind of education called Education for Sustainable Development. Now, this is not a name that I coined for myself. I didn't wake up one day and say, oh, I'm going to introduce something called Education for Sustainable Development. It's actually a recognized type of education that is fast growing in Western countries. And if you go through the United Nations websites, particularly UNESCO, you'd see that they recognize education for sustainable development. In fact, in the Sustainable Development Goals, the fourth Sustainable Development Goal that is about, making sure that everyone has access to quality education, actually has one of its targets as everyone has to have access to education for sustainable development. But if I ask you that how many of our schools are currently teaching education for sustainable development, it's almost none. If I ask you
Mm.
that, okay, you're working in the development space, did you study it in any school? Did you take it in any course? Did you do it as any extracurricular activity? You most likely say no. So it's not really popular in this side of the world. And I knew that my passion lied very strongly in education. And so I thought about the work I'd done, the experiences I've gathered, where my passion was everything. I'm like, okay, I'm going to build a school. And in that school, we are going to introduce education for sustainable development to young people. And the reason why we chose young people, of course, like you mentioned, is because we make the largest demography in Africa. And we've been at this for thousands of years. Africa is still as underdeveloped as how I could remember it. And so I felt like if Africa is going to develop, we need to start equipping young people to begin to also see themselves as drivers of positive social change in their communities. So basically, that's what the development school is about. We started in January 24th. I think that was International Day of Education, and we're growing very, very strongly. So I'll pause there and see if I can tell you more about, what we do in subsequent questions that you ask me.
All right. Thank you so much. It's such a profound work because even myself, right? Even myself, this you just said was something I was thinking strongly about last year, in all honesty. And because I sort of manage a school. We own like two schools in Ogun State, and even moving because at some point I was thinking because I know about the SDGs, and I was thinking, students are not being trained to solve problems. This normal, the conventional way, and they don't know that there are problems that would affect them if they can't solve them, and many of them are smart. Many of
Yeah,
them know stuff, but they need a platform to cultivate them to ensure that they can address global problems at a local level. And
yeah,
I thank God for the work you do. I saw something you did recently at the American Corner. How
yeah,
you the most beautiful part of what you're doing is I love the way you're systematically training people. This is that's it's very beautiful to behold, and
thank you.
I even look forward to being a part of what you're doing.
Thank
So okay, I
you.
think you partly addressed it, but the next question here is why do you believe that it's a necessity? Why do you believe this um, CDS is a necessity.
Okay, let me start by sharing a statistic. You know, like it's something that we say a lot that Africa is like one of the youngest continents in the world. And that's because the population of people that are young compared to the population of people that are old and aged in Africa, it's like really a lot. So as it stands right now, we have about 200 million young people, like a lot of people, that are young in sub-Saharan Africa. And I had worked before I started the development school. I had worked with an international nonprofit called Peace First. And at Peace
Mm.
First, I was working as the regional manager for Sub Saharan Africa. So, what Peace First had was they had funding. And they were saying to young people that, oh, if you have an idea to solve a problem in your community, come to us and we're going to give you funding. And
Wow.
in the years that they started, the minute that they opened in Sub Saharan Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa became the largest region in terms of the number of young people that were always coming to say, I have an idea, I have an idea. And as the
Wow.
regional manager for Sub-Saharan Africa, I had to sit with these young people, ask them, okay, share your ideas with me. Tell me what problem you've seen. And then they will share problems. So I live in Lagos, Nigeria. I'm speaking on the call with somebody that's from Kenya, and he's telling me that pregnant women in my communities actually give birth by the roadside because the
Wow.
hospitals are very far from where I live. And so I want to create this thing where hospitals can be mobile and they can actually come closer to where people live. And I'm just like, wow, how old are you? And this guy is saying, I'm just 19. And I'm like, you have this idea? And he's like, yes,
Yeah,
I
I
have
do.
this idea, but there's no organization that's going to put money in my hands until I found you guys. And then I'm speaking to
Um,
another person, and this person is saying that girls in my community actually drop out of school because they get pregnant. Why? Because they don't have money to afford sanitary pads, and whenever they're on their periods, they go ask Buddha riders. That's what they call like bike men in East Africa. That they go ask them for money, and in exchange for money, these people sleep with them. So they not
ah,
only get money for the sanitary pads, they eventually get pregnant as well. And so, what do you
pregnant.
want to do? Is telling you that I want to create reusable sanitary pads and teach these girls how to create their own sanitary pads so that they don't have to go and beg money from these people who sleep with them again. And so, I mean, I was on that role for like 2 years, and I sat there and I would every day be on a call with a young person who is just brimming with an idea to create change in their community. But then again, I also saw the challenges that they had. Some of them were not educated enough. For example, they did not know
Yeah.
how this aligned with the sustainable development goals. They did not know where the opportunities were. They did not know how to, scale their work and bring it out there, maybe represent their work on a global platform. They didn't have the education, they just had the passion. And you know what happens
Yeah.
when you have passion? You just go out there, you're like, I'm passionate. But after a while, you sort of like get burned out because you don't know the system behind it. You don't know what's supposed to keep you stable when things are not going well. You don't know what to do. You just know that I know what I'm supposed to do, but you don't know how you're supposed to do this thing. So I saw that gap, and immediately I left that role. I knew that, okay, I needed to sort of carry on this work and also pay it forward. I have had the opportunity of having my work represented on global stages, sitting with head of states, and sort of doing research on my own to understand the sustainable development goals and sustainable development in general. And I'm really curious at how Africa is still so underdeveloped after everything that we're doing. Because if we were to look at how many continents have the number of NGOs that we have in this continent, I'm very sure that Africa has one of the largest number of NGOs. Like everybody's coming here to dump their help and to dump their aid. Like even Western countries are coming here to start a foundation. Like it's almost like Africa is like that sick patient that needs everyone's help. So in as well, we have all of this help. What are we doing with it, and why are we still so underdeveloped? So this has been something that's kept me curious for the longest time. So I said, okay, you know what? If nobody's going to do it, I'm going to do it. I'm going to create a school, and then we're going to really take young people who are so passionate, who make up the largest demography in Africa, and we're going to take them through this school, through this system where they know what to do, but we also give them the how to do it as well. So it was not a case of let's just do an outreach. It was a case of let's create an educational or academic institution because that's the only way that we can give them a system that is lasting and sustainable. So that was where TDS came from. That was more like the problem that I saw, that there were so many Africans, young Africans, who had the passion to create change in their communities, but who didn't have the education, the skills, or the resources to follow this thing through or build something that was really, sustainable or aligned with what is happening on a global scale. That's one. The second problem would be that, we all know about the Sustainable Development Goals, the United Nations coming together to create those goals. And the deadline for the goal as it stands is 2030. And we're currently in 2023, which gives us 7 more years to actualizing these goals. And if you've noticed, because the time is now short, there is now a lot of opportunities for young people to be a part of the work, but it's only you that you know that you will be able to enjoy the opportunities, right? So
True.
while we have this mass and this pool of young people who are passionate and everything, they're also missing out on all of these opportunities because they just don't know that there is anything like ESD. They just don't know that there's anything like sustainable development goals. Their own is, I just want to create reusable sanitary pads. They don't know that there's an SDG that is focused on gender equality and sexual and reproductive health and justice. So they don't know those things. So in my head, I'm like, okay, you know what? Your passion is fine, but we need to fuel this passion with adequate knowledge and exposure and guidance and skills, resources, and maybe someday funding, so that you're able to take your passion into something that's actually lasting and sustainable. So, I mean, that's another part of the problem that I saw. I don't want to take too much time, but of course, you already know all the problems we're facing in Africa. And I'm a firm believer that if we're going to start solving these problems, we need to involve young people because we are like the largest demography. So that's another part of that problem as well. So there are so many things, but I'll stop at these three and then
Yeah.
see if subsequent ones come up. Yeah.
Yeah. So from what you're saying, it's that the most pressing need, or the goal that would cause a ripple effect, especially in the acceleration of all other goals, 17 of them, is goal 4, education, which targets 7, if I'm correct.
I think that all the goals are actually important. I don't think there is one goal that is not as important, but education is sort of like the carrier of everything, because education
Yeah.
goes beyond classroom education. Education is somebody gives you the knowledge of something. And if you look at the way we treat our climate, maybe the reason why we are not taking it seriously is because we just don't even know how important it is, which also speaks to education. If you see the way we treat life underwater, or we treat life on the land, or even the whole SDGs thing, you'd see that maybe the reason why we treat it with such carefreeness and whatnot is because we don't have the education for it. So, but you see a difference in somebody that has the knowledge and somebody that does not have the knowledge, and then they are able to stand in a place where they're able to say, I know I can't solve all 17 SDGs, but I'm able and I'm in a position where I can look at them and I can decide which one I want to focus on because somebody brought that knowledge and somebody brought that education to me. So it's not more important, but it's a very big driver in actualizing all the 17 SDGs.
Okay. But that means, if I would ask you, I'm very curious. So by 2030, how many solutions do you believe you will have produced through this platform?
I think that the reason why I can't give you a definite number is because we're working with individuals. So as it stands now, we created the development school in January. And by February, we made a call and we said, okay, you know what, we've built a school. The next course of action is to mobilize young people from all over sub Saharan Africa and have them be a part of this school, to join this school as students. And in like 2, 3 days of making that call, we already had like 300 people that had signed up
Wow.
from different countries: Nigeria, Uganda, Burkina Faso, Namibia, Ghana, even some from the UK and the US who are Africans, but are
Mm.
Africans in diaspora. And I looked at them and I'm like, imagine if all these people saw a need in education and they signed up to be a part of this school because they require the knowledge that we're giving them. And then they take that knowledge and then use it to create their own solutions. It goes beyond one school now to having 300 solutions because you empower 300 people. So the goal is, I may not be able to give a definite number to say by 2030, this is the number of solutions that would have come out from development school, but I'm really hoping that I would have been able to train a significant number of young Africans, going into like tens of thousands, and equip them with knowledge, skills, and resources for them to create their own solutions. One of the things that I love the most in this line of work is actually even identifying problems and learning about problems. Like, I'm very curious about stuff, and I'm very happy is as we're on this call and you say something like, in my own community, I noticed that the people always have to steal irons that are used for bridges and railings. That reality may not be my own reality. So by speaking to you, I've learned a new thing about your reality, because you are in your own community and you're the one observing the problems in your own community. So the more we observe those problems, the more we can now brainstorm to say, oh, okay, what do you think is the root cause? Why do you think they're actually stealing these things? And then you're able to say, maybe they're hungry, maybe it's poverty. And I'm like, okay, why are they hungry? Maybe they're unemployed because they're not educated. Okay, why? And then you just keep uncovering more problems, and then from there we have multiple solutions come out from there. So my own goal really is to continue to learn about problems and to help young people also learn how to observe problems and think about a way that they can solve them. I don't know how many solutions will come out from there, but I know that the moment we're equipped with problem solving skills and problem observation skills, then solutions will definitely come out. So, but I can't say this is the number. I just really hope to continue having a large base of students coming to the school, a large base of investors who see the need to put their resources into equipping the students, and then many solutions come out from those individual students that we can then trace back to the knowledge that they gained from the development school. So I don't know if that answers your question in terms of
Yeah,
how many solutions.
yeah, absolutely. Even even seeing you said flagged off in January, and you have well over 300 people who already coming. It just shows the relevance of the vision, the
Exactly.
relevance of the idea, and the fact that people want to do stuff. People are brimming with ideas, but don't know how, don't know which way to go, and they end up being stranded, and some might even get frustrated and give up. Very,
Yeah.
very, 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 very valid. Very, very valid. Let me just move straight away to the next. Okay, so okay, let me just read from my script.
Okay.
Okay, people give up basically when they face problems, when they face hard problems. I'm sure when you were coming up with this entire idea, there were difficulties, there were questions, there were areas of ambiguity. But how did
Yeah.
you surmount those problems, and how have you stayed positive?
Thank you for asking that question. I'm going to share an unpopular opinion, because most of the time, when you ask people what challenges that they face when they're doing things like this, most people will say funding. Is funding an
Yeah.
issue? Is it like one of the biggest challenges that young people face when they're building stuff? The answer to that question is yes. But for me, it wasn't like one of my biggest challenges. I feel like for me, one of the biggest challenges that I faced was actually a lack of blueprints and templates to build this thing, to follow it after. So, what do I mean by that is you have a vision in your head, you want to build an academic institution that is self sustaining, that will last, that is sustainable. You can see all the big pictures, and then you look and you say, which organization in Nigeria actually does something like this that I can model this thing after? And then you don't find any. One,
Hmm.
because you're sort of like the starter, you're the one that is you're the one blazing the trail, you are like the pioneer. Doesn't mean that there are no other organizations around the world doing it, but around you, like around me, I didn't see that. What I saw were a lot of NGOs that were built out of passion, and they were just doing the work, but they were not really building, they didn't build it with the mindset of, I want to build a lasting institution. It was just more like, oh, let me just do my work the way I'm supposed to do my work and just impact my society, and then that's it. And that's a very different mindset from when you are building a business as a profitable business. You see that they build their businesses like, this thing has to last, this thing is an institution. And so you see organizations like Coca-Cola, you see organizations like Dangote that just launched their refinery, and you're like, how did they build such an institution? And why are NGOs not thinking in this scale? So for me, I was thinking in that scale, but I didn't have the right models or templates or blueprints. One of the things that I did to overcome that was doing research. And training myself to look outside of my immediate environment. Because if you look within your immediate environment for too long, you sort of conform to what you can
Mm,
find within that environment. And this is something that happens. Like, I remember when I first started this whole development work in my community in Ogu State, the first problem I noticed was that young girls in my community didn't want to advance to tertiary schools. They didn't want to go to university. And that was because for the longest time, the image that they saw was of one madam that had an hairdressing salon, and they felt like, oh, I could also do this and I'm fine. And I knew that if I was going to sort of like start to address that problem, I needed to create a different image and present it to them and say, see, there's a possibility for you to grow up in this kind of place and still be great. And it helped a lot of them,
mm,
right? So that same principle sort of applies to our work as well. If you want to do really great things, you need to start looking at where great things are actually built. And you need to start challenging yourself to expand your mind and to expand the capacity of what you can see. So whether that is by starting to attend conferences, summit, listening to TEDx, watching some useful documentaries, reading books, just doing anything that just takes you out of what you can see within your immediate environment to what's possible to achieve out there. Like, the truth is, many of us, we may not have traveled abroad, we may have not stepped our feet in Dubai and all of those fancy countries, but there are loads of materials that we can access right now on the internet that gives us an idea into the kind of things that men like us, women like us, they're actually building. And when you see it, you're like, oh my gosh, so this thing is possible. That means I can also build something like this too. So for me, getting access to exposure was one of the first things that helped me overcome that challenge of thinking small and just limiting myself to the confines of what I could see within my own immediate what's it called, environment, right? And then of course there was the whole issue of funding, which for me was not an insurmountable challenge, because all I needed to do for that was to ask myself, do I want to build this as an NGO that was totally dependent on grants and trust funds and family legacies, and I'm always having to ask people to help me out and give me their money? Or do I want to build a financial self-sustaining model for this organization, for this school, so that with or without me, with or without somebody giving us a grant, this school can generate its own funding? And that was what we did. So we're creating courses, we're building, stuff that would enable it to generate its own funding, and it can run whether or not we get access to grants and all that. So I will stop with those two challenges. I'll stop with those two
thank you.
challenges. So I'll add one. I'll add one more. The last challenge would be knowing what next to do. So what do I mean by that? So let's say you woke up with a vision and you're like, oh, tomorrow is International Day of Education, so we're going to launch the development school. And so you launch the development school on the International Day of Education. And then after the launch, everybody comes to your Instagram to say, wow, Sean, what you've done is so amazing. I want to be a part of your work. You are now faced with that question of, okay, now that we've launched, what next am I supposed to do now? Okay, let's even assume that I create a system where I can now build a team. After building the team, what next? So there's always that question of, what
Well,
next are
nice.
we supposed to do
To do.
here? But how I was able to overcome that is understanding that even if you are the visioneer of whatever it is that you are building, you are not the island of knowledge. Like, there is no
Mm,
knowledge that is solely resident on you. There are so many people that know how to do things that you're stuck on, and you just need to find them around you and surround yourselves with them. And so when you start to ask questions or share your vision or share your idea and strategize with them, what next to do then begins to come, in addition to making sure that you're really praying and asking God for your guidance and the direction, but also asking Him to send you the right people so that when you table it to them, they can also begin to share ideas on what next to do. So, yeah, I'll stop there for now.
wow. Thank you so much for opening up, so much, and sharing this with us. Because, okay, let me speak in context of ALX, because the goal of ALX, the goal of ALX, beg your pardon, is to ensure that every participant of this program eventually becomes a change agent solving a
Okay.
particular problem. And what you just said, would really help a lot in coming times, knowing that what you just need as a founder is clarity of vision, clarity of purpose, and people would come, the right people, God helps, and the vision will call out to people, and eventually things will keep on, because, like you said, no one is an island of it all.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
that's very profound. That's very profound. So, okay, well, you've already told us, but how did you encounter the SDGs per se? How did you get involved? Is it through Peace First? How did you get exposed to
No.
SDGs? Yes.
Funny enough, it wasn't through Peace First. I just happened to be somebody that there was a lot of research. So remember, I told you that I had studied English in school, but while I was in
Yeah.
school, I'd already gotten drawn to this field of just helping people that were struggling. I didn't know what it was called. I didn't know there was any field that it was an umbrella. I didn't know anything. I just knew that okay, I went to an orphanage. I saw children who were getting malaria and whatnot. I noticed that their doors and the nets of their windows were torn. And then in my mind, I was like, I can't leave school like this now. This was during my final year. So I'm like, oh, let me mobilize a couple of friends. Let's come back. Let's fix their nets. Let's do new doors. Let's bring food provisions for them. Let's just help out. So when I did it, I mean, I felt this thrill of, oh my gosh, I feel like this is what I want to do for the rest of my life, just helping people, helping society. And so I began to ask, is there a field that this thing is under? Like, can I turn this passion into a career? That was one of the questions I began to ask myself. And then fortunately, I found a friend whose dad was working with the African Union. And then she also got into this field. And then she started going to the African Union to speak and whatnot. And you know that image of when you find somebody speaking at the African Union or at the United Nations, where there will be this microphone in front of their mouth, and then they would have their names in front of them, and then the country they're representing, maybe Nigeria or Turkey, will be in front of them, and they just be like, Your Excellencies. That image, I caught it very early on. And that's another thing I was speaking to you about image. If I didn't see that image, I would never have known that that thing existed. But then I caught that image and I was like, okay, this is what I want to do. Like every time I pray or anything, this is like where I see myself. This is what I see myself doing. And so immediately I caught it. I said, what field is this? The people that work these jobs, the people that speak on these platforms, what field, like what career do they practice? And that was where I got to find out that there was a career called development, international development, global development. I'm like, okay, I'm going to dedicate myself and commit my time to learning about this field. And it was from doing all of those research that I got to learn more about the UN. I got to learn more about the Sustainable Development Goals, got to learn more about the problems that the world is encountering, got to learn more about what it means to work under economy, under society, under environment, and just learned about multilateral organizations and every of those things. It was because of my drive for knowledge that made me take the course that I just did in public policy as well. So it's always just this hunger for knowledge, always asking the right questions. Like once you catch an image, you're like, okay, what questions can I ask that would expose me to the right information about this image that I have just caught? And immediately you begin asking those questions, whether on Google, whether from somebody that already works in that field, the more you know about that as well. So for me, it was a case of finding international development due to intentional study and then learning about the UN, other multilateral organizations, and then the Sustainable Development Goals as well. Your mic is muted.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. Well, from your story, it's just clear how that you're a good person, and and now that it has been one intention after the other that has been driving you. You saw a little girl, I mean, you notice something, you're very observant, and it doesn't
Yeah.
just stop there. You go after the knowledge required, and you say you caught an image, and you didn't just stop there. You went for the knowledge required to how will I put it, to enter into the image you caught. That's very, 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 very profound. And I think that's even just I just think you're the best person that can even carry out Development School Africa, because it's something you've lived, it's something you've touched, it's something you've experienced, and
Yeah.
man, look at you. You're already speaking at
Yeah.
the United Nations and big places like that, because so can you okay, you're not yet 1 year old, but in your work generally in development over 6 years, can you share a success story of how your work has been able to transform lives?
Yeah, sure. I can definitely share a success story. So, um, there are quite a number of them, but let me go back to sharing one of the stories when I was working at Peace First as the regional manager for Sub-Saharan Africa. So that story I shared about this young man who realized that girls were dropping out of school. It was a guy, like he's actually not a woman. He doesn't go through, menstrual cycles, periods, or whatnot. But he
Yeah.
realized that was the major challenge that was affecting girls in his community. There was something like period poverty and all that. And, he just needed somebody to guide him on how he can create a solution around it. And so he found Peace First at that time. And then he found, because I was the regional manager, so I had to coach him. And so I asked him basic questions. What's this challenge you found? He told me. I mentored him. I helped him refine the idea. I told him to create like a theory of change around it. He showed me, I approved it, then I took him into how to create a budget, basically how to build his project, from scratch. And then he came up with a project. We had a call similar to what we're having. I coached him. I corrected whatever it was I had made a mistake and all of that. And then he went on to implement his project, like all that. Then some months down the line, I had the opportunity of visiting Uganda because he lived in Uganda. His name is Walter. So I had the opportunity of visiting Uganda, and I went there and said, "Oh, let's have a workshop. Let me even see all these young people that I'm always coaching and coaching. Let them even come and meet me. Let's talk and everything." And oh my gosh, that day I felt like a celebrity. I mean, I'm not Davido, I'm not Whiskey, I'm not Burna, I'm not those people. But the fact that in
Yeah.
my own little space, I can be making an impact in people's lives and they'll see me and they'll be like, oh my gosh, we've always wanted to meet you. I mean, it was just so special to me. And then Walter comes for that event. And when he was about to leave, he hands something over to me. I looked at it and it was one of the reusable sanitary pad that he created, and he said, "Oh, Sean, I just wanted to have this so you can see the work that I did, and you can see that I
Wow.
actually used the funding and I created this thing." And I was so touched. And I remember when I was heading back to Nigeria, I had a stopover in Ethiopia for like a while. And then while I was there, I sat down with a particular woman in the bus. So the airport transfer was coming to pick us from the airport in Ethiopia to the hotel that we're going to sleep that night because it was a long layover. So while we're there, we're talking, and the woman was asking me, "So where are you from?" I said, "Nigeria." I said, "What brings you to Uganda?" I told her. She said, "Oh, that she too. She's actually originally from Uganda, but she works in Sudan now because she works with the UN." And so we're just speaking, and then one conversation led to the other. And then she asked me about what I did, what brought me to Uganda. I told her, and then I showed her the sanitary pads that Walter gave to me. And then this woman was like really wowed, and she was thinking, okay, is there a way I could connect the both of them so that it can help him scale his work and his
Wow.
project on a much larger scale? I felt like for me, that was just a validation that wow, there's no such thing as a coincidence. Like I could have been in another bus, I could have been with this woman, I would have not talked, and yet that conversation happened, or that I could have coached so many other people and not met Walter. But Walter's story is just one of many others. I've met so many other young people who have personally testified to what that coaching, mentoring, and even funding that they received actually did to them in terms of their own social entrepreneurship or development journey and where they are now. So I feel like for me, that's a very big, significant moment that I'm not going to forget in a hurry.
Wow. 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 That's so beautiful. Wow. That's so so wow. 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 Hmm. Interesting. I'm inspired. Wow. Wait. Let me just backtrack, rewind a little.
Okay.
If that's fine. No, I just want to know. You said you caught an image. All
Yeah.
right. But did you? I'm not sure you explained. What did you actively do to materialize that image to where you are today? Let me just have that bonus tip.
Thank
Yeah.
you. It's a bonus tip.
Yeah.
Okay. So basically, The image that I caught was of my friend when she was speaking at the African Union,
Yeah.
and she had the old microphone thing, and immediately I saw it, I was like, oh my gosh, that's what I want to also be a part of. And I one of the first things, if you know me well, one of the first things I'll do is I'll come and ask you questions. So I remember asking her, how were you able to get to this platform, how were you able to get this etc. Well, one of the things I didn't mention was also the fact that I had struggled with a low self-esteem when I was growing up. And so one of the
Mm.
disadvantages of growing up with a low self-esteem is it can make you look at some things and say, these things are not for me, they are unattainable, they are only for some
Ah,
people, maybe because her dad works there, that's why I can't, that's why she's there, and all that. But at the time that I'd left school, that low self-esteem had significantly been healed. Let me switch off my camera.
okay.
Okay, great. So that low
Yeah.
self-esteem had significantly been cured. And so I was in a much better place. Like I knew that, oh, it can't be because her dad works there. That's why. It has to be something else. So I went to ask her. And then I realized that one of the things that she had done was that she joined certain communities where young people that were interested in the development space were actually there. They were present. And within these communities, they were sharing so many opportunities. Like, for example, the UN needs someone to represent young people that were working on that climate. They will not put it out there publicly. For some, they might put it out there publicly, but most of the time, they will go into communities that are affiliated with them and say, can you nominate one or two young people within your community that can come and represent us here? And that's how those communities will now share the application link within their communities. So when you look at them and you are asking, how come so and so person they are speaking at the UN, or how come so and so, where did they find the opportunity? Mostly it's because of the communities that they belonged to. And so when I saw
Uh,
that happened, I also started to look for communities that I could join and I could be a part of. And that was when I joined communities like, Yali Network. I joined communities like Global Shapers. I have joined communities like Their World. I've joined so many communities. And by joining this community, even Peace First, being a part of Peace First was a community. And by joining all these communities, Leap Africa, whatnot, that's where you then get opportunities around. Oh, they ask us to nominate two young people that can be at this high level virtual consultation with the UN, and then they can just see the work you're doing. Because another thing is, aside from joining communities, let's say that's one. Second thing is, you now have to make yourself impactful within the communities, because there are some communities where there are a lot of young people, like 2,000 young people are in that same community. So you're asking yourself, how do I stand out here? It's as
mm,
simple as saying, we need a young person to submit their story about something. Submit your story. When they say, oh, we need a young person that can volunteer to do so and so, volunteer to do it. If they say we need a young person that can help us do this and you have the skill, do it. If they come to meet you and they say, oh, Elisha, we know you have this certain skill, we don't know if you are doing it, but we think you can, don't shy away, do it. Like, that's how you stand out
mm,
within the communities. And you realize that immediately they say nominate a young person, your name comes to mind first, like, oh,
mm,
Elisha is doing this so and so. And then the third thing is, if you have a platform and you can also contribute something beneficial to these communities, then do it. So in my own case, I had a platform which was Peace First. And then there was a particular community that I was a part of, which was Leap Africa. And Leap Africa had this youth day of service where they used to mobilize young people and just implore them to do good in their community. And Peace First had a platform where they were giving funding. So it felt like a kind of partnership, like, okay, I can actually help with funding some of the young people that are doing great in your community. And so the first time that I gave an informal virtual consultation at the United Nations, it was because Africa recommended me. And it was because I
wow.
stood out by virtue of what I was able to contribute to their own community. So join communities, do impactful work so you stand out. And if you have a platform that can contribute to that community, you should also do that as well. So you're top of mind, and then you can begin to gain access to all of these opportunities. So outside of communities, also follow the relevant pages on social media, please, because they always also share these things online too. And then you just make sure you apply. And if you apply today, you don't get it, you apply tomorrow, you don't get to see. There is nobody who at the top of their head United Nations just woke up and said, this is the person we want. everyone had to go through an application process. So you may now see that I will share it online and say, "Oh, I'm speaking here today," and you're like, "Wow, Sean, how do you even used to get all these opportunities?" The truth is, majority of them I also applied for them, right? So if you apply today and you're rejected, tomorrow you're rejected, then maybe you need to now ask, why are they rejecting me? Could it be that
Mm,
my applications are not standing out? Could it be that maybe I don't know the audience? Like, who are the people reading my story? Can they relate with the things I'm writing inside this essay? Or do I need to learn how to tell my stories better? So, if you are truthful with yourself, you know exactly what you now need to do in order to make your applications also stand out. But it should not stop you or discourage you from continuing to apply, because at the end of the day, one or two of them is going to go through. And immediately you get your foot in the door, just do your best to stand out so that the next time they remember you and then they recommend or nominate you again. So, yeah, those are some of those
wow,
tips.
wow. Thank you. Thank you. I would have wanted to probe deeper, but I think for this for the context of of this conversation, I will just stop it there. All right. Think we're gradually wrapping up. We're gradually wrapping up. So, okay, are there any specific programs or resources that you found helpful to the work you do at CDS? But you initially said, within the context of Nigeria, they were not. You were like, a pioneer doing stuff like this. But were there resources you found helpful?
Yes, I actually did find resources because I looked outside of Nigeria, I looked outside of my immediate community, and I saw organizations that were also building similar things to what I was doing. Like I mentioned, the African Leadership University group sort of gave me an image. Peace First gave me an image. A couple of other organizations gave me an image. But one platform that I found particularly helpful was actually the globalgoals.org. It's an organization that was like an offshoot of the UN, but is predominantly focused on global goals, attaining and all of that. And they have loads of resources on there for schools, educators. If you want to teach the global goals, if you want to learn how to start working in it as a young person, they have loads of resources there. So I spent a lot of time studying that website, having access to their resources, reading it, and all that. There's also UNESCO. UNESCO is actually like the organization that is pushing education for sustainable development. And because they know that they're the ones pushing it, they've also created so many resources for schools, educators that want to adopt education for sustainable development. So I also spent a lot of time researching ESD, studying the UNESCO's website and all the resources that they had done, and now creating our own native framework or blueprint for how the development school was going to run. Because whether or not we like it, our climate in Africa is kind of different. And when you talk about the global goals, for example, if you talk about the global goals, let's say you talk about um, education, the way that educational problems might be perceived in a country like the US might be different from the way educational problems are perceived in a local community here in Lagos. And that's because our realities are very different. So, who knows about the problems in this local community in Lagos better than the people that are actually living within the community? So, it was a case of, even though the goals are global, we need to now find a way to localize it to fit our immediate context in Africa. And so while we're empowering our students with global knowledge and all of that, it is for them to be able to use it within the context of their own communities to solve the problems that they are observing and facing within their own local communities in Africa. So, but those organizations I mentioned and those resources that I found, they actually helped in creating some sort of template and blueprint.
Wow. Wow. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. And I believe that will be useful to me and useful to all the people who are interested in being a part or certain stuff, things like what you're doing. All right. I
Thank
think this is the last question, and
you.
almost at an hour mark. But at ALX, we're encouraged to do our things. And what advice would you have for me and for every other person who is trying, to do great stuff, solve hard problems, and do great work for the community?
I think that one of the things that I would advise, which I already mentioned, is look outside of your immediate environment. Like, especially
Mm.
if you're born in Africa or you live in Nigeria or whatnot. You know, there are great things here, but there are not a lot of great things here. What we have, they are potentials. We have a lot of potentials that are yet to materialize in this country, in this continent. But when you look outside of this continent to where people actually dare stuff, like they do things that no other person would have thought that they could do. Now, the funny thing is, Africa, Nigeria, they give us the platform to be able to do these things. Elisha, I want to confirm if you can still hear me.
Yes, I can. Yes, I can.
They give us the environment to push our boundaries when you think about it, because we are very brilliant people, Africans, and we have the passion and we have the drive to do these things, right? We may not have the whole infrastructure, we may not have the enabling environment, we may not have the funding, but sometimes the ones we have, they push us to they test our limits at what we can achieve. And so I've heard stories of people who have gone outside of this country and somehow they're able to stand out outside of the country because of the tough circumstances and situations that they grew up under in Nigeria and in some other countries in Africa and whatnot, right? So they kind of test us. But another disadvantage to it is it could make you think small. It could make you look at yourself and say, this is the biggest that I can ever achieve. And the reason why you think like that is because you've not opened your mind, you've not expanded your mind to see things outside of your immediate scope or your immediate environment. So I would use an analogy to explain what I'm trying to describe to you. I am a Yoruba girl,
Mm.
and in Yoruba, when they tell you to describe the earth, and they say, what's the earth in Yoruba? We call it Aye. That's what we know. That's the Yoruba word for earth. Now, one time somebody asked me and said, okay, what's the Yoruba word for Mercury or Jupiter or Pluto, Uranus, and all the other planets that exist? The truth is, there is no Yoruba word for them. Everything is pretty much I. And so, if you have a very typical Yoruba person who only grows up hearing I, the moment that person realizes that we have other planets aside from the earth, it will be very difficult for them to comprehend it because they did not ever grow up thinking that there was anything else except for I. I don't know if you understand what I'm saying, but as an English
Yeah.
speaker, you know that there's Uranus, there's Jupiter, there's Earth, there's all of that. Why? Because you're exposed to that knowledge. So I'm just really going to say that if you already have a vision for art things, trust me, that vision can continue to grow. And one of the things that would help you, even when things are hard, is that that vision is still burning inside of you. And one of the ways to keep your vision burning is to consistently search for knowledge, exposure, things that will continue to inspire and motivate you, especially things that are in line with what you want to do. It could be TEDx speeches, it could be TED Talks, it could be books, it could be, but just continue to expand the capacity of your mind. That's even one of the things that make you a great leader. And the more the vision continues to burn in your mind, even when things get difficult, the more you see that you're striving towards achieving, doing big and hard things because you know exactly where you're going to and you know that where you are, that's not the end. You are not yet there because you know what you're seeing, right? So just expand the capacity of your mind and build the limits to what you think that you can achieve. So yeah, that's the last tip that I'm going to leave with you guys.
Wow. Thanks a whole lot. If there are two words that really stand out for me, because I also like to pay attention to details, and from what you said, there are about two words that I feel really stand out in your story. One, you consistently mention image,
Yeah,
and you always speak of realities.
yeah,
It's not in your reality, it's their reality. You
yeah,
know, image, and realities. Image and reality. Ability to take images and, nurture them, and the ability to, you said you're interested in problems, in
yeah,
finding problems, understanding people's realities and what you can
yeah,
do to help.
yeah,
And
yeah.
it's so profound. It's so
Thank
profound. Thank you so much for your time. I know you're very busy. Thank you so much for creating time, even though it was
yeah.
up and down before we
I
we got
know.
this.
Just happy that we got to do this. Thank you so much for
Yeah,
having me. I really enjoyed this interview. If you give it to me, I can talk forever. But let's just stop. Let's just leave it here for now.
yeah, yeah. Okay, I have other questions, but I don't know whether it is suitable for this context. I just wanted to probe deeper and deeper and deeper. But
We
thank you
can always
for,
find some other time, maybe outside of this
yeah,
platform. Talk.
this
Yes.
platform.
So you
Yeah,
can ask
th-
questions.
Yeah. Thank you for living out such an exceptional life. And thank you for showing that it's possible. Thank you for standing out for God, standing out for Jesus, even through the work that you do. And I'm so glad. I'm so glad to know you. I'm so glad, even from afar, to know someone like you and the work that you do, and your level of humility. It's inspiring, and it's also it's also teaching us, or teaching me that no matter the height you get to, you must always be accessible and even be open to contribute to other people's life. And thank you for
Thank you.
living full and
Thank,
dying empty eventually. Thank you so
thank you
much.
so much. Thank
Thank
you.
you so
Thank
much.
you. Thank you so much.
Any any quotes? Any last quotes that you want
Well,
to
I
leave?
feel like I have already said so many quotes. I'll just be looking forward to hearing this, on live, and I'll just be looking forward to catching a replay of this and sharing it with as many people that should listen to it as much as possible. So thank you all for listening. Thank you, Elisha, for having me.
Yeah, it's an honor. Thank you so much. Goodbye.
Bye. Goodbye.
Bye. Yeah. All right, guys. You just added such an honor having Seun Olagunju-Lana on this platform. Privileged to do my Hummingbird with someone of a capacity, doing great stuff, not just at a local level, but at a global scale. She's really committed through the Development School Africa to ensure that Africans are equipped with skills and education, especially to localize, global problems and solve them at a local scale. She's doing really great work. And I think they're doing something in Accra. I think they've done it already. The same stuff. They did one in Lagos recently, in America, as at around Ikeja, Oshodi, training people on how to solve problems. And I believe that this is about the greatest thing you can ever do. You can say, if you give a man a fish today, they'll come tomorrow. But if you teach people how to fish, you're giving them true liberty. And as Nelson Mandela said, true education makes any man unfit to be a slave. I'm inspired by the work she does, and I hope you also have been inspired and propelled to know it's possible. We'll do our things and we'll succeed together. Cheers, and God bless you.